The market square of Aldsworth was no place for heroics, and Saren Calloway had no intention of becoming one. She was selecting ribbons, pale blue ones to match the gown her mother insisted she wear to the Pemberton ball, when the shouting began. Soldiers poured into the square from the eastern road, their red coats slicing through the mourning crowd like wounds. Vendors scattered, abandoning their stalls. A woman screamed somewhere near the fountain. Children clung to their mothers' skirts. And a man, tall and dark-haired with blood streaming from a gash above his left eyebrow, stumbled directly into Serene's path. He caught her arm to steady himself, and for one suspended moment, their eyes met. His were the color of winter seas, gray-green and wild, with something she couldn't name. Desperation, yes, but something else beneath it. Something that made her breath catch in her throat. "Please," he said, voice low and ragged. "They cannot find me." The soldiers were close now, close enough that she could hear their captain barking orders, close enough to see their hands on their weapons, close enough that whatever she did next would define everything that came after. Later, Serene would tell herself she acted on instinct, that there was no thought involved, no calculation, no choice. But that would be a lie. She chose. In the space between one heartbeat and the next, she looked at this bleeding stranger with his desperate eyes and his blood-stained coat, and she chose. She kissed him. Not a gentle kiss. Not a ladylike brush of lips meant to scandalize. She pulled him down by the collar of his ruined coat and kissed him like he was hers, like they were lovers reunited after months apart, like the entire world had narrowed to this single burning point of contact. He stiffened in shock. Then, God help her, he kissed her back. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone, with a tenderness that made no sense given the circumstances. He tasted of copper and rain and something darker, something that whispered of secrets and midnight roads and a life she couldn't begin to imagine. The soldiers thundered past. The captain's voice cut through the chaos, demanding to know if anyone had seen a man in a dark coat, tall, wounded, dangerous. One of the vendors pointed east, toward the mill road, and the soldiers followed, boots pounding against cobblestone until the sound faded into the distance. The stranger pulled back first. His eyes searched her face with an intensity that made her stomach flip. "Why did you do that?" he asked quietly. Serene had no sensible answer. "Because you looked at me like I was the only solid thing in a drowning world. Because something in your eyes reminded me of a trapped animal, and I have never been able to watch something suffer, because I am apparently a fool of the highest order." "You were bleeding," she said instead. "It seemed rude to let them catch you." Something flickered across his face. Not quite a smile, but close. "Rude," he repeated. "You risked your reputation to save a stranger because letting them catch me would have been rude. When you say it like that, it sounds absurd." "It is absurd." He swayed slightly, catching himself on a market stall. The gash above his left eyebrow was bleeding freely now, dripping down his temple. "You should walk away. Pretend this never happened." But Serene was already moving, tucking herself under his arm, taking his weight against her shoulder. He was heavier than he looked, all lean muscle and coiled tension. "Can you walk?" "I can try." "Then try faster. The soldiers will circle back." She guided him through the back alleys of Aldsworth, through the narrow passages between buildings that she'd known since childhood. And Croft's garden wall with its crumbling mortar, the gap behind the smithy where stray cats gathered for warmth, the overgrown path that led to the abandoned dovecote on the edge of town. He moved with her silently, his breathing harsh but controlled, his arm draped across her shoulders like they'd done this 1,000 times before. Twice she felt him stumble. Twice she caught him. The dovecote was small and crumbling, half reclaimed by ivy. Pigeons had long since abandoned it, and now it served as shelter for nothing but spiders and dust. But it was hidden from the road, and it was dry, and when Seren lowered him onto the dusty floor, the stranger closed his eyes with something like relief. "You need a physician," she said. "No physicians." His eyes opened, sharp despite the pain. "No one who might talk. You're bleeding." "I've bled before." He pressed his palm against the wound, grimacing. "It looks worse than it is. You don't know that. I know that a physician will ask questions, and questions will lead to soldiers, and soldiers will lead to a noose." His voice was matter-of-fact, almost casual. "So no physicians." Seren stared at him. The morning light filtered through the broken roof, catching the angles of his face. He was handsome, she realized, in a stark, severe way. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, and those impossible winter sea eyes, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "Who are you?" she asked. "No one important. Important enough for soldiers to hunt. Important enough to be worth money dead." He shifted, wincing. "Which is all you need to know. That's not nearly enough. It's all I can give you." He met her gaze steadily. "You saved my life back there. I won't repay that kindness by dragging you further into my problems. Go home. Forget you ever saw me." But even as he said it, she heard the catch in his voice, saw the way his hand trembled against his wound. This man, whoever he was in no condition to go anywhere. And Seren Calloway, despite every sensible instinct screaming at her to run, found herself sinking down onto the dusty floor beside him. "I can't bring you to my home," she said. "My brother would ask questions. But I know an inn about 2 miles from here, the Briar and Stone. It's small, quiet. The innkeeper owes my family a favor." He was already shaking his head. "I have no money. Nothing to trade. I have money. I won't take your charity. It's not charity." She didn't know why she was arguing, why she was fighting so hard to help a man she'd met 10 minutes ago. "It's a transaction. You need a place to heal. I need to understand why I just kissed a complete stranger in the middle of a crowded market." That almost smile again, fleeting and strange. "You kissed me because you're either very brave or very foolish. Which do you think it is?" "I think," he said slowly, "that it might be both." Getting him to the Briar and Stone took the better part of an hour. He leaned on her more heavily as they walked, his strength flagging, his breath coming in shorter gasps. Twice she had to stop, letting him rest against a tree while she watched the road for soldiers. Twice he tried to tell her to leave him, and twice she ignored him. The innkeeper, a weathered woman named Mrs. Halford, took one look at them and asked no questions. She simply led them upstairs to a small room at the back of the inn, brought hot water and clean linens, and closed the door behind her with a knowing look that made Seren's cheeks burn. "She thinks we're lovers," the stranger said. He was sitting on the edge of the narrow bed, and Serene was dabbing at his wound with a wet cloth, trying not to notice how close she was standing, how warm his skin felt beneath her fingers. "Let her think what she wants. It will damage your reputation. My reputation survived me kissing you in broad daylight. I think it can survive a night at an inn." He caught her wrist gently, stilling her hand. "Why are you doing this? Truly?" She didn't have a sensible answer. "Because you looked at me like I was drowning, and you were the shore. Because when I kissed you, something shifted in my chest, and I haven't been able to breathe right since. Because I am tired of being sensible and safe and proper. Because you needed help," she said quietly, "and I was there. Most people would have looked away. I'm not most people." He released her wrist, but his eyes stayed on hers, searching. "No," he said finally. "You're not. The wound, once cleaned, was not as bad as she'd feared. A deep cut, but not dangerous if kept clean. She bandaged it with strips of linen, while he sat perfectly still, watching her with that unreadable expression. "I should go," she said when she finished, "before someone notices I'm missing." "You should." But he caught her hand as she turned to leave. "Wait, I don't even know your name." Seren Calloway." "Seren," he repeated, and something about the way he said it made her shiver. "I'm Matthias Crane." It was a lie. She knew it the moment the name left his lips. Something in the way he said it. Too practiced, too careful. But she didn't push. "Rest," she said instead. "I'll come back tomorrow to check your wound." "You shouldn't." "Probably not." She moved toward the door. "But I will anyway." She was halfway out when his voice stopped her. "Seren?" She turned. He was watching her with an expression that made her heart stutter. "Thank you. For everything." "Don't thank me yet," she said. "You still owe me an explanation." She left before he could respond, slipping down the stairs and out into the fading afternoon light. Her heart was pounding. Her lips still tingled from that kiss in the market. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that she had just made either the best or the worst decision of her life. She didn't know which, but as she walked home through the gathering dusk, she found herself hoping she'd have the chance to find out. 3 days passed before the soldiers left Aldsworth. Seren visited the Briar and Stone each morning, telling her family she was walking for her health. Her brother Crispin raised an eyebrow the first time. By the third, he was openly suspicious. "You've never walked anywhere voluntarily in your life," he said over breakfast, buttering his toast with aggressive precision. "What's really going on?" "Fresh air. Dr. Melling said it was good for the Constitution." "Dr. Melling also thinks bloodletting cures everything from melancholy to broken bones." Crispin narrowed his eyes. "You're hiding something." "I'm hiding nothing. You're a terrible liar, Seren. Always have been." She excused herself before he could probe further, slipping out the back door and taking the long way to the inn. The morning was cool, mist hanging low over the fields, and she walked quickly, her mind already racing ahead to the small room at the Briar and Stone. To him, Matthias Crane, if that was even his real name. In 3 days, she'd learned almost nothing about him. He was educated. That much was obvious from the way he spoke, the books he asked Mrs. Halford to bring him, the occasional Latin phrase that slipped into his conversation. He was wealthy, or had been once. His clothes, though travel-stained and bloodied, were finely made. And he was running from something far more dangerous than common soldiers. But whenever she pressed for details, he deflected, changed the subject, looked at her with those winter sea eyes and said, "The less you know, the safer you are." It was maddening, and yet she kept coming back. Today, she found him out of bed for the first time, standing by the window with his back to the door. He turned when she entered, and something in her chest tightened at the sight of him. The wound was healing, the scar already fading to a thin red line above his left eyebrow. The bruises had faded from purple to yellow. He looked less like a man on the edge of death, and more like someone she wanted to know better. "You shouldn't be standing," she said. "I've been lying down for 3 days. Any longer, and I'll forget how to use my legs." Dramatic. Honest. But he smiled, just slightly, and moved to sit on the edge of the bed. The soldiers? Gone. This morning, apparently. They searched the miller's barn one last time and left. Relief flickered across his face, quickly suppressed. "Then I should leave as well, before they return. You're not healed." "I'm healed enough." He met her eyes. "I've already stayed too long, put you in too much danger." "You haven't put me in any danger. You're lying." "I'm not." "Seren." The way he said her name, soft and serious, made her breath catch. If anyone finds out what you did for me, if anyone connects you to the man those soldiers were hunting, your life will be destroyed, your family's reputation, your brother's prospects, everything. Then we won't let anyone find out." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You make it sound simple, isn't it?" "No." He stood again, restless, and moved toward her. Too close. She could smell him. Soap and wood smoke and something underneath that was just him. "You don't understand what you've gotten involved in. What I am." "Then tell me." "I can't." "You mean you won't?" "I mean I can't." He stepped closer still. "Because telling you would put you in more danger than you're already in." They stared at each other. The air between them felt charged, electric. She could feel her heart pounding against her ribs, could see the pulse jumping in his throat. "You kissed me," she said quietly. "In the market. I kissed you first, but you kissed me back." Something shifted in his expression. "I shouldn't have. But you did." "Yes." The word was rough, torn from somewhere deep inside him. "I did." "Why?" He didn't answer. But his hand came up, almost involuntarily, and his fingers brushed her cheek. The touch was feather-light, barely there, and yet it burned through her like wildfire. "Matthias, don't." He pulled his hand back like he'd been scalded. "Don't say my name like that." "Like what?" "Like it means something. Doesn't it?" Before he could answer, footsteps sounded on the stairs. Heavy boots. More than one person. Serene's blood went cold. Matthias moved with a speed that belied his injury, pushing her behind him, reaching for a knife she hadn't even noticed on the bedside table. His body coiled, ready. And in that moment, she saw something she hadn't seen before. Not a wounded man running from soldiers. Something else entirely. Something dangerous. The door opened, and Serene's heart stopped. Because standing in the doorway, impeccably dressed, and wearing an expression of polite surprise, was Lord Aldrich Pemberton. The man who had been courting her for 3 months. The man whose ball she was supposed to attend tomorrow night. The man who was now looking between her and Matthias with slowly dawning comprehension. "Miss Calloway," Aldrich said, his voice silk over steel. "What a surprise to find you here." Serene stepped out from behind Matthias, her mind racing. "Lord Pemberton, I didn't expect to see you." "Clearly not." His eyes moved to Matthias, taking in the bandage, the knife, the protective stance. "And who might this be?" The silence stretched. Serene felt the weight of it pressing down on her, felt the moment crystallizing into something that would define everything that came after. "My husband," she heard herself say. "Matthias Crane. We were married last month, in secret." Aldrich's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "How very interesting. I had no idea you were even being courted, Miss Calloway. Or should I say, Mrs. Crane. It was sudden." She moved to stand beside Matthias, and after a moment's hesitation, he slipped his arm around her waist. The touch was tentative, uncertain, but it looked real enough. "We didn't want to wait." Clearly, Aldrich's gaze swept over them both, assessing. "And your brother? Does he know about this secret marriage?" "Not yet. We were planning to tell him after the ball." "Were you?" Aldrich smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "How convenient that I found you first. I'm sure Crispin will be fascinated to hear the news. I do hope you'll both attend the ball tomorrow night. It would be a shame to miss the opportunity to introduce Mr. Crane to society." It wasn't a request. It was a trap, and they both knew it. "We'd be honored," Matthias said smoothly. "Wonderful." Aldrich's smile widened. "I'll look forward to it." He left. The door clicked shut behind him, and Serene sagged against Matthias, her legs suddenly weak. "What did you just do?" he asked quietly. I saved us. You married us. Fictionally. He doesn't know that. Matthias released her, stepping back, and his expression was unreadable. Do you have any idea what you've done? He'll investigate. He'll dig. He'll find out there's no record of our marriage, and then he'll destroy you. Then we'll have to be convincing. Saren, we don't have a choice. She met his eyes, her chin raised. He was going to expose us anyway. At least this way, we control the story. This way, we're trapped. We were already trapped. She moved toward the door. I'll come back tomorrow. We need to prepare for the ball. She left before he could argue. But as she walked home, her heart pounding, her mind spinning, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just made things infinitely worse. The Pemberton ball was everything Serene had dreaded, and more. She stood at the entrance to the grand ballroom, Matthias at her side, and felt every eye in the room turn toward them. Word had traveled fast. By now, half of society knew that Miss Seren Calloway had secretly married a mysterious man named Matthias Crane, and the other half was desperately trying to learn the details. Smile, Matthias murmured, his hand resting on the small of her back. You look like you're walking to your execution. I feel like I am. Then at least let me share the scaffold. His fingers pressed gently against her spine, warm through the thin silk of her gown. We're in this together now. Together. The word sent a strange flutter through her chest. She glanced up at him, and her breath caught. He'd cleaned up well. More than well. Mrs. Halford had somehow procured evening clothes for him, and in the candlelight of the ballroom, he looked every inch the gentleman. Tall, broad-shouldered, devastatingly handsome, in a way that made her pulse jump. The scar above his left eyebrow was barely visible now, hidden by his dark hair, and his eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel like she was the only person in the room. Aldrich materialized before them, all polished smiles and predatory grace. Mr. and Mrs. Crane, he said, and the emphasis on the title was unmistakable. How delightful that you could attend. We wouldn't miss it, Matthias said smoothly. His arm slid around Seren's waist, pulling her close against his side. My wife has spoken so highly of your hospitality. Has she? Aldrich's eyes flickered to Seren. And how long have you known each other? Your wife and I were just becoming acquainted when she suddenly became unavailable. 6 months, Seren said, the lie coming easier than it should have. We met when he was visiting relatives in the county. The Ashburtons, near Thornwick. Aldrich nodded, his expression giving nothing away. I don't believe I know them. They keep to themselves. Clearly. Aldrich's gaze swept over them both. Well, I do hope you'll save a dance for me, Mrs. Crane, for old times' sake. Of course, Seren said, though the thought made her skin crawl. After Aldrich disappeared into the crowd, Matthias guided her toward the edge of the room, where the shadows were deeper and the crowds thinner. He knows, he said quietly. He suspects. There's a difference. Not for long. Matthias looked down at her. He's going to investigate. The Ashburtons, the marriage, everything. Then we need to be convincing enough that his investigation doesn't matter. How do you propose we do that? Seren looked up at him. In the candlelight, his face was all sharp angles and shadows, beautiful and dangerous. We need to act like we're in love. We've been acting. We've been standing next to each other. That's not the same thing. She stepped closer. Aldrich has known me for months. He knows how I behave when I'm interested in someone. If we want him to believe this, we need to be convincing. And how do you behave when you're interested in someone? I look at them. I find excuses to touch them. I laugh at their jokes even when they're not funny. I forget to breathe when they're close. Are you interested in me? The question hung between them, charged and dangerous. I kissed you, she whispered. In the market. When I didn't know your name or your face, or anything about you. What do you think? His hand came up, fingers brushing her jaw, tilting her face toward his. I think you're the most unexpected thing that's ever happened to me. Is that a compliment? I'm not sure yet. His thumb traced her lower lip, and she shivered. But I'm starting to think it might be the best kind. The music swelled, a waltz beginning. Around them, couples moved toward the dance floor, and Matthias extended his hand. Dance with me. Can you? Your wound. I'll manage. His eyes glittered with something that might have been amusement. Unless you're afraid. I'm not afraid of you. Then prove it. She took his hand. Dancing with Matthias was nothing like dancing with Aldrich. Where Aldrich was polished and precise, every step calculated, Matthias moved with a raw grace that stole her breath. His hand burned through the thin fabric at her waist. His eyes never left hers. And when he pulled her closer than propriety allowed, she didn't resist. When the waltz ended, Aldrich cut in. Surely your wife can spare one dance for an old friend. Matthias's expression went flat. We were just about to get refreshments. One dance. Aldrich's smile was polished, pleasant, and utterly false. Unless you're worried I might steal her away. It wasn't a question. Seren felt Matthias's reluctance, felt his hands tighten briefly before releasing her. I'll be watching, he said quietly. Alone with Aldrich, Seren felt the trap closing. His grip was too tight, his body too close. Tell me, Mrs. Crane, he said softly. How long do you think your little fiction can last? Her blood went cold. I don't know what you mean. Don't you? His voice dropped, pitched for her ears alone. I know there's no marriage certificate. I know you met him less than a week ago. And I know he's not who he says he is. She kept her expression neutral, but her heart was pounding. Perhaps he's simply a private man. Or perhaps he's a fugitive. Aldrich's eyes glittered. There are soldiers looking for someone matching his description. A man accused of treason against the crown, worth quite a substantial reward, dead or alive. The room tilted. Seren forced herself to keep dancing, to keep breathing. If you believed any of that, you would have turned him in already. Perhaps I'm waiting for you to make the smart choice. He leaned closer. Abandon him, Miss Calloway. Tell everyone the marriage was a mistake, a moment of madness. Come back to me, and I'll make sure no one ever learns what you did. And if I refuse, then I'll destroy you both. Your brother's business connections will evaporate. Your father's investments will fail, and your mysterious husband will find himself in chains before the week is out. The music ended. Aldrich released her, stepping back with a formal bow. Think about it. I'll give you until midnight to decide. He walked away. Seren stood frozen on the dance floor. Matthias was at her side in seconds. What did he say to you? He knows. Her voice was barely a whisper. He knows everything. The soldiers, the treason charge. He's giving me until midnight to abandon you. If I don't, he'll destroy us both. Silence. Then, quietly, then you should abandon me. What? He's right. Whatever you think you feel for me, whatever this is, it's not worth destroying your life over. Go to him. Tell him you made a mistake. Save yourself. No. Seren, I said no. She grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the garden doors, away from the watching eyes. I didn't kiss you in that market and drag you to an inn and lie to half of society just to abandon you now. You should. Well, I'm not going to. She pushed through the doors, into the cool night air, and spun to face him. So stop telling me what I should do and start telling me the truth. Who are you? Really? He was silent for a long moment. The garden was dark, the music from the ballroom muffled by distance. Above them, stars glittered coldly. My name isn't Matthias Crane, he said finally. I know. The soldiers aren't hunting me for treason. They're hunting me because I'm worth more than you can imagine. Because if they capture me, certain people stand to gain power, money, influence. Why? Who are you? He stepped closer. His hand came up, cupping her face with devastating gentleness. You should run from me, he whispered. You should go inside. Tell Pemberton whatever he wants to hear and forget you ever saw me. I can't do that. Why not? Because when I kissed you, something happened. Something I can't explain. And I'm not going to walk away until I understand what it is. His breath caught. His thumb traced her cheekbone. You're dangerous, he said softly. More dangerous than Pemberton. More dangerous than the soldiers. Because you make me want to tell you everything. Then tell me. He pulled back. His eyes searched hers. And then, so quietly, she almost didn't hear it. I'm Hadrian Vile, the Duke of Windmere, and the people hunting me are trying to steal my title, my lands, and my life. Before she could respond, a voice cut through the darkness. Well? Well. Aldrich emerged from the shadows, his smile triumphant. This is even better than I expected. The missing Duke of Windmere, hiding in my very own county. I wonder what the Earl of Thornwood would pay for that information. The clock in the ballroom began to chime midnight, and Seren Calloway had never felt more alive or more terrified in her entire life. The midnight chimes seemed to stretch forever, each one a hammer blow against Seren's chest. 1, 2, 3. Aldrich stood in the moonlight, his smile predatory and his eyes gleaming with triumph. The garden around them was silent, frost beginning to settle on the rose bushes, their thorns glinting like tiny daggers in the darkness. Behind him, the golden glow of the ballroom spilled through the garden doors, music and laughter drifting out like sounds from another world. 4, 5, 6. Well, Miss Calloway, Aldrich's voice was silk and venom. The clock has struck. What is your answer? She looked at Hadrian. The Duke of Windmere. A man she'd kissed without knowing his name, hidden without knowing his secrets, defended without knowing the cost. He stood rigid beside her, his hands curled into fists at his sides. His eyes were fixed on Aldrich with a hatred that burned cold, and in the silver moonlight, he looked dangerous, beautiful, and utterly alone. 7, 8, 9. Don't, he said quietly. Don't sacrifice yourself for me. I'm not sacrificing anything. You are. He finally turned to look at her, and the pain in his expression stole her breath. Your reputation, your family, everything you've built, your brother's business, your father's standing in society, every dream you've ever had of a respectable marriage. His voice cracked. I'm not worth it. That's not your decision to make. It is when I'm the one who dragged you into this. 10, 11. Aldrich laughed, a sharp, ugly sound that echoed off the garden walls. How touching. The fugitive duke and his market square savior. It's almost romantic, really, if it weren't so pathetic. What do you want, Pemberton? Hadrian's voice was deadly calm, but Seren could see the tension coiled in his shoulders. Miss Calloway, as my wife. Aldrich stepped closer, and the moonlight caught the cruel curve of his smile. With her family's connections and her father's growing fortune, she'll make an excellent countess. Marry me, Miss Calloway, and I'll forget everything I've seen tonight. Your duke can disappear into the countryside, and no one will ever know you were involved. A husband who sees me as currency, Seren said flatly. A husband who sees you clearly, which is more than I can say for your current companion. 12. The final chime faded into silence, and in that silence, Seren felt something cold settle in her chest. Not fear, Something else entirely. Something that felt dangerously like clarity. And if I refuse, then I'll send word to the Earl of Thornwood tonight. By morning, soldiers will be searching every inch of this county. Your mysterious husband will hang for treason, and you'll be ruined by association." He shrugged, elegant and cruel. "The choice seems obvious to me." The garden was silent. Even the music from the ballroom seemed to fade. Seren could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of this moment pressing down on her. She thought about everything she'd been taught. A lady's reputation is her only currency. A woman's choices are limited by the choices of men. Safety lies in compliance, in submission, in accepting the paths that others lay before her. And then she thought about that moment in the market. The stranger with desperate eyes and blood on his face. The kiss that had changed everything. The way Hadrian had looked at her in the inn, like she was something rare and precious. "No," she said. Aldrich blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "No." The word came stronger this time. "I won't marry you. I won't abandon him. And I won't let you use me as a pawn in whatever game you're playing." "Serene." Hadrian's voice was rough with warning. "Think about what you're doing." "I've thought about it." She turned to face him, and something in her chest cracked open. "I've thought about nothing else since the moment I saw you in that market. And I know this is mad. I know it's foolish and dangerous and everything I've been taught to avoid. But I don't care. You should care. Maybe. But I don't." She stepped closer, close enough to see the wild hope flickering in his eyes. "I kissed a stranger to save his life, and I don't regret it. I lied to protect him, and I don't regret that either. And if standing by him now means watching my reputation burn, then so be it." Aldrich's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake." "Perhaps." Seren didn't look away from Hadrian. "But it's my mistake to make." Silence stretched between them. Then Hadrian moved, closing the distance in 2 quick strides, and his mouth came down on hers. This kiss was nothing like the one in the market. That had been desperate, frantic, born of necessity. This was deliberate. This was a choice. His hands cupped her face, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones, and he kissed her like she was water in the desert, like she was everything he'd ever wanted and never thought he could have. She kissed him back with equal desperation, her fingers tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. She could taste champagne on his lips, could feel the rapid beat of his heart against her chest, could sense the moment when something between them shifted from pretense to truth. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "Well," Aldrich said coldly, "how theatrical." Hadrian didn't release her. His arms stayed wrapped around her waist, solid and possessive. "Leave, Pemberton. Now." "Or what?" "Or I'll remind you why the Duke of Windermere was once considered the most dangerous swordsman in England." Fear flickered across Aldrich's face, quickly suppressed. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." Aldrich stared at them for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away, his footsteps crunching on the gravel path, his silhouette swallowed by the darkness. They were alone. Serene sagged against Hadrian, her legs suddenly weak. "What did we just do?" "Made enemies of a very powerful man." "That's not what I meant." He pulled back to look at her, and his expression was something she'd never seen before. Open, vulnerable, terrified, and hopeful in equal measure. "No," he said softly. "It's not." They left the ball through a side gate, slipping away before anyone could notice their absence. The night air was sharp with frost, their breath forming small clouds as they hurried across the frozen lawn. Hadrian knew a path through the woods, an old poacher's trail that led back toward the briar and stone. In a small clearing where moonlight filtered through the branches, he stopped walking, My father was murdered, he said, his voice rough with grief. Poisoned at his own table by men he trusted. My mother fled to the continent with nothing but the clothes on her back. And I've spent the last 2 years running from shadow to shadow, trying to survive long enough to reclaim what's mine. The Earl of Thornwood. He wants my title, my lands, everything my family built over generations. Hadrian's expression hardened. He was my father's closest advisor, his most trusted friend, and he killed him without hesitation when the opportunity arose. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be smart. He gripped her shoulders, his eyes burning into hers. Walk away, Seren, while you still can, before Pemberton destroys everything you love. I can't walk away. Why not? Because I think I'm falling in love with you. The words came out before she could stop them, hanging in the cold air between them like something fragile and impossible. And I'm not going to run from that. Not for Pemberton. Not for anyone. His breath caught. His hands tightened on her shoulders. And then, slowly, his forehead dropped to rest against hers. You're going to be the death of me, he whispered, or the saving of you. Same thing, maybe. They stood like that for a long moment, foreheads touching, and breath mingling in the cold air. Then he took her hand and led her onward through the dark woods. When they reached the inn, Mrs. Halford handed over the key without a word. They climbed the stairs together, and Seren's heart pounded with every step. She knew what was coming, knew what this night would mean, knew that once they crossed this threshold, there would be no going back. The room was small, the bed narrow, the fire burning low. Hadrian closed the door and leaned against it, his eyes never leaving her face. We should talk, he said. Later. Seren. Later. She moved toward him, watching his breath catch as she approached. I choose you. Tonight. Tomorrow. Whatever comes next. His control shattered. He caught her around the waist, pulling her against him, and his mouth found hers with a hunger that stole her breath. He was gentle, devastating. His hands traced her body like she was something sacred. He whispered her name against her skin like a prayer, like a promise. And when they finally came together, Seren gasped at the overwhelming rightness of it. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest. The fire had burned down to embers, casting the room in a soft amber glow. She could hear his heartbeat beneath her ear, steady now. This can't last, he murmured. By morning, every soldier in the county will be looking for me. Then we have until morning. His arms tightened around her. They lay together in the flickering light, two people who had found each other through impossible circumstances, knowing that dawn would bring consequences they couldn't escape. But dawn was hours away, and for now, they had everything they needed. Seren woke to cold sheets and gray morning light. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then memory crashed over her like a wave, and she sat up sharply. The room was empty. Hadrian stood by the window, fully dressed, his bag packed by the door. He was staring out at the frost-covered fields, his shoulders rigid. He didn't turn when she moved. You're leaving, she said. I have to. His voice was flat, controlled. Pemberton will have sent word by now. If I stay, they'll find me. And if they find me here, with you. He stopped, unable to finish the thought. So you're running. I'm protecting you. By leaving me. After everything that happened last night. After everything we said to each other. Finally, he turned. His face was carefully controlled, but his eyes betrayed him. They were red-rimmed, haunted, filled with pain. Last night was a mistake. The words hit her like a physical blow. She actually staggered, one hand reaching out to steady herself. A mistake? she repeated numbly. I was weak. He took a step toward her, then stopped. I let myself want something I had no right to want. I let myself believe, for one night, that I could have a normal life, a future. You. The last word came out rough, almost strangled. But I can't. I made my own choice last night. You made a choice based on incomplete information. He ran a hand through his hair. You don't know what Pemberton can do, what the Earl of Thornwood is capable of. These men murdered my father in his own home. If they learn you helped me, if they discover what we... He stopped, unable to continue. What we what? She demanded. Say it. I can't. Coward. The word hung between them. Pain bled through his mask. Yes, he said quietly. I am. Then don't be. Fight for yourself. Fight for us. There is no us. There could be. No. He moved toward the door. I'm the Duke of Windmere. You're the daughter of a country gentleman. Even if I weren't being hunted, even if everything was different, it still wouldn't work. Why not? Because I would destroy you. He turned at the door, and his eyes were wet now. Everything I touch turns to ash. My father died trying to protect me. My mother fled and hasn't been seen in years. If I let you in, you'll end up just like them. Dead. Or worse. You don't know that. I know myself. His hand closed on the door handle. The kindest thing I can do for you is leave. And what about what I want? What you want doesn't change what's possible. He opened the door, and Serene felt something break inside her. I love you, she said. Hadrian froze. I know it's mad. I know we've only known each other for days. But I love you, Hadrian Vile. I love the way you looked at me in that market, like I was the first real thing you'd seen in years. I love the way you protected me, even when you could barely stand. And if you walk out that door, I will spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been. Slowly he turned. His face was shattered. Don't, he whispered. It's too late. I already do. He stood there, caught between leaving and staying. Then quietly, I love you too. Hope flared in her chest. Then stay. I can't. Loving you is exactly why I have to go. Because if I stay, they'll use you against me. They'll hurt you to hurt me. And I couldn't survive that, Seren. I couldn't survive losing you the way I've lost everything else. You're not losing me. I'm right here. Not for long. Not if I stay. He turned and walked away. Down the narrow hallway. Down the creaking stairs. Out of the inn and out of her life. Seren stood in the doorway watching him go, feeling her heart crack into pieces with every step. She wanted to run after him, wanted to scream his name, but she didn't, because some part of her understood. He wasn't leaving because he didn't love her. He was leaving because he did. She sank against the doorframe and let herself cry. Great, racking sobs that shook her entire body. Grief for what they'd had. Grief for what they might have been. Outside, the sun rose over the frost-covered hills. And somewhere on the road north, a duke who had finally learned to love was running as hard as he could in the opposite direction. 3 days passed in a blur of whispers and sidelong glances. Word had spread, as word always did, in a small county where gossip traveled faster than the mail coach. By the time Seren returned home, still wearing her ball gown from the night before, her eyes red and swollen from crying, her brother was waiting in the front hall with a face like a thundercloud. Tell me it's not true, he said, before she'd even closed the door. Tell me you didn't spend nights at an inn with a strange man while pretending to be married to him. She couldn't answer. The words lodged in her throat like stones. Crispin's expression crumbled from anger to something worse. Disappointment. Seren, what in God's name were you thinking? I was thinking that he needed help. And you couldn't help him in some other way? Some way that didn't involve destroying your reputation? He began to pace the hall. Do you have any idea what people are saying? Mrs. Pemberton has already cut us. 3 invitations to summer parties have been withdrawn. Father is threatening to disown you. My reputation isn't destroyed. It will be. Crispin stopped pacing, his eyes sharp with fear and frustration. Pemberton has been talking. Nothing direct, nothing actionable. But hints. Implications. By the end of the week, everyone in the county will believe you had an affair with a fugitive. He wasn't a fugitive. The soldiers seemed to think differently. Crispin's voice softened. They came by this morning, looking for a man matching your husband's description. Wanted for treason against the crown. Substantial reward. He paused. Who was he? Seren? Really? She met his eyes. I can't tell you. But I need you to trust me. He's not what they're saying. He's innocent. Innocent men don't run from soldiers. Innocent men do when they're being framed for crimes they didn't commit. Crispin was silent for a long moment. Then he sighed, some of the anger draining from his shoulders. Father wants to send you to Aunt Meredith in Cornwall until this all blows over. No, I'm not running. Whatever consequences come, I'll face them here. Seren, I said no. She lifted her chin. I made my choices with open eyes. I don't regret them. And I won't hide in Cornwall like a criminal. That evening, a knock at the door. The housemaid Betsy held a folded piece of paper, her expression nervous. This came for you, miss. A messenger said it was urgent. Said he'd been riding all day to deliver it. Serene unfolded the letter with trembling hands. Miss Calloway. The letter began in a neat, precise hand. You don't know me, but I know your Duke. My name is Edmund Hale. I was Hadrian's solicitor before he was forced to flee Windmere. I have served his family for 20 years. The Earl of Thornwood has made his move. Hadrian was captured this morning near the northern border, betrayed by an innkeeper seeking the reward. He's being held at Thornwood Hall, awaiting transport to London for trial. The charges are fabricated, treason, conspiracy against the crown. But the evidence has been manufactured with care. Without intervention, he will hang within the fortnight. But there is hope. I have documents. Letters between the Earl and Lord Pemberton detailing their conspiracy to murder the late Duke. Financial records showing bribes paid to magistrates and witnesses. And most damning of all, a signed confession from one of the Earl's men, written on his deathbed, out of guilt for what he helped do. There is a Lord Chancellor's hearing in London in 3 days. The Earl believes he has control of the proceedings, but he doesn't know about these documents. If you present this evidence there, before witnesses, the Earl won't be able to bury it. The truth will come out. Meet me at the crossroads south of Aldsworth at midnight tomorrow. Come alone, or with those you trust absolutely. The Earl has spies everywhere. Hadrian spoke of you. He said you saved his life with a kiss and your courage. Now, I'm asking you to save it again. Edmund Hale Seren read the letter 3 times. Captured. Trial. Hang within the fortnight. He had left to protect her. He had walked away from everything they might have had because he thought his love would destroy her. And now, he was in chains, facing execution for crimes he didn't commit. She moved to her writing desk, pulled out paper and ink, and began to write. Crispin, I know you're angry. I know you think I've lost my mind, but I need your help, not for me, for him. His name is Hadrian Voyle, the Duke of Windmere, and the men who murdered his father are now trying to murder him. I love him, and I will not let him die without a fight. She paused, pen hovering over the paper. Then she added, If you ever trusted me, trust me now. Meet me in the stables at dawn. Your sister. The crossroads was a lonely place at midnight. Seren stood beneath an ancient oak, her dark cloak pulled tight against the autumn chill. The moon hung low and heavy in the sky, casting long shadows across the empty road. Every rustle of leaves made her heart jump. Every distant owl cry sounded like a warning. Then a figure emerged from the shadows, a thin man in a worn greatcoat, his face drawn with exhaustion, but his eyes bright with purpose. "Miss Calloway, I'm Edmund Hale." He handed her a leather satchel heavy with documents. Letters between the Earl and Lord Pemberton detailing their conspiracy. Financial records showing bribes paid to magistrates and witnesses. And the confession, written by a man who couldn't bear to die with the sin of murder on his soul. This is enough? It's enough to bring the Earl to trial. The Lord Chancellor's hearing is in 3 days. Present this evidence there, before witnesses, and the Earl won't be able to bury it. But you'll need to move fast. The Earl has influence everywhere. The sound of hoofbeats echoed down the road. Seren's hand went to the small knife hidden in her cloak, but then she recognized the rider's, Crispin, his face grim but determined, and beside him, a man with the bearing of a soldier. "Colonel Marcus Webb," Crispin said, pulling his horse to a stop. "He served under Hadrian's father for 15 years. He's been waiting for a chance to repay that debt." Webb dismounted and bowed stiffly. "Miss Calloway, your brother told me what you're planning. It's dangerous. The Earl has men everywhere." "I know. You could be arrested, charged as an accomplice." "I know that too." Webb studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You'll need an escort. The roads aren't safe. And when we reach London, you'll need someone who knows how to navigate the courts. You're offering to help? I'm offering to see justice done." His expression hardened. "The late Duke was the finest man I ever served. I won't let his son hang for crimes he didn't commit." They rode through the night and the following day, stopping only to change horses and rest for brief hours. By the morning of the 3rd day, exhausted but determined, Seren stood outside the Lord Chancellor's chambers in London. Her dress was travel-stained, her hair hastily pinned, her heart pounding against her ribs. "Are you ready?" Crispin asked. "No." She clutched the satchel to her chest. "But I'm going anyway." The chamber was packed with lords and lawyers, the air thick with whispered conversations and the rustle of papers. At the front, behind a heavy wooden table, sat the Lord Chancellor himself, a severe man with a powdered wig and eyes that missed nothing. And in the prisoner's dock, seated in chains, was Hadrian. Seren's heart stopped at the sight of him. He was thinner than she remembered, his face bruised, his fine clothes replaced by coarse prisoner's wool. But when his eyes found hers across the crowded room, something sparked in them. Disbelief, hope, and beneath it all, the unmistakable light of love. "My lords," Serene's voice rang out, cutting through the murmur of conversation. "I have evidence that the Duke of Windermere is innocent of all charges." The chamber went silent. Every head turned toward her. The Lord Chancellor raised an eyebrow. "And who might you be?" "Seren Calloway, my lord. And I have proof that the charges against the Duke were fabricated by the Earl of Thornwood to steal a title that doesn't belong to him." She stepped forward and began laying out the conspiracy, letter by letter, document by document. The murder of the late Duke by poison, the bribes paid to manufacture evidence, the threats made to silence witnesses, and finally, the deathbed confession, a dying man's desperate attempt to unburden his soul. Through it all, Hadrian watched her with wonder. Through it all, the Earl of Thornwood's face grew darker and darker, his hands gripping the arms of his chair until his knuckles went white. When she finished, the chamber was utterly silent. The Lord Chancellor turned to the Earl. "What say you to these accusations?" The Earl rose, his face purple with rage. "Lies. Fabrications. This woman is clearly besotted with the prisoner. She would say anything to save him. These letters bear your seal, your signature. Forgeries. The confession was witnessed by a priest and a physician. Both are prepared to testify." The Earl opened his mouth, closed it. His eyes darted around the chamber, searching for allies, for escape. But there was none. The evidence was too damning. The truth was too clear. "Guards." The Lord Chancellor's voice was cold. "Take the Earl of Thornwood into custody. He will be held pending trial for murder and conspiracy." Guards moved forward. The Earl began to shout, to protest, to threaten. But his words meant nothing now. The truth had finally come to light. "The Duke of Windermere is hereby cleared of all charges." A guard stepped forward and unlocked the chains binding Hadrian's wrists. They fell away with a clatter that echoed through the suddenly silent chamber. Hadrian rose slowly, as if not quite believing he was free. Then he was pushing through the crowd toward her, his eyes never leaving her face. "You came," he said when he reached her. "Of course I came. I told you to stay away. I told you I would destroy you." "You were wrong." She reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the bruise on his cheekbone, the healing cut on his lip. "You've been wrong about a lot of things, Hadrian Voyle. I know." The words came out hoarse, thick with emotion. "I know I was." "Then stop running. Stop pushing me away. Stop being afraid of what we could be." "And what could we be?" "Everything, if you'll let us." He was silent for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. "I don't know how to stop being afraid." "Then let me teach you." He kissed her then in front of the Lord Chancellor and half the peerage of England. Kissed her like she was the only real thing in a world gone mad. Kissed her like a man who had finally found his way home. "I choose you, Serene Calloway," he said against her lips, "and I'm never running again." The scandal was magnificent. Every newspaper in London carried the story. The Earl of Thornwood arrested for murder and conspiracy. Lord Aldrich Pemberton fled to the continent, his estate seized, his name disgraced. The Duke of Windermere, once condemned as a traitor, now hailed as the victim of a monstrous injustice. And at the center of it all, a country gentleman's daughter, who had kissed a stranger in a market square and refused to let him go. Society didn't know what to make of Serene Calloway. Some called her a heroine, a woman who had risked everything for love and justice. Others whispered darker things, questioning her virtue, her motives, and her propriety. The gossip followed her everywhere, hissing through ballrooms and tea parties like wind through autumn leaves. She found she didn't much care. Hadrian reclaimed Windermere within the month. The estate had been neglected during his exile, the fields overgrown, and the tenants anxious and uncertain. But he threw himself into the work with a determination that bordered on obsession, as if he could rebuild his life one repaired fence at a time, one replanted field at a time, one mended relationship at a time. And through it all, Serene was beside him. Not as his wife. Not yet. Hadrian had insisted on doing things properly, on courting her the way she deserved to be courted. He called on her every day during approved visiting hours. He brought her flowers from the Windermere gardens, roses and lilies and delicate spring blossoms. He sat in the Calloway drawing room with her mother as chaperone, discussing the weather and the harvest, and absolutely nothing of importance. It drove her mad, and she loved every minute of it. "This is ridiculous," she told him one afternoon, 3 months after the trial. They were walking in the garden, her arm looped through his, maintaining the precise 6 inches of distance that propriety demanded. "We've already shared a bed. We've already declared our love in front of half the House of Lords. And now we're pretending to have a normal courtship. We're not pretending. His eyes crinkled with amusement. We're providing society with a narrative it can accept. The scandalous beginning, followed by a respectable courtship, followed by an unimpeachable marriage. By the time our grandchildren hear the story, it'll be thoroughly boring. I doubt any story involving you could ever be boring. You'd be surprised. He stopped walking, turning to face her. The afternoon sunlight caught his features, highlighting the strong line of his jaw, the warmth in his eyes. Seren, there's something I need to ask you. Her heart stuttered. Yes? He dropped to one knee. The garden seemed to hold its breath. The roses froze mid-sway. Even the birds fell silent, as if the entire world was waiting to hear what came next. I've loved you since the moment you kissed me in that market square, he said quietly. You saved my life that day, and not just from the soldiers. You saved me from becoming the man I was afraid I'd be. Cold, closed off, alone. Hadrian, let me finish. He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. I spent 2 years running from my enemies. Yes, but also running from myself, from the possibility that I might actually deserve happiness. And then you found me, and you refused to let me run anymore. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Someone had to. Someone did. He smiled, that rare, brilliant smile that transformed his entire face. And I'm asking that someone to spend the rest of her life with me, to be my wife, my partner, my home, to remind me every single day that love isn't a weakness. It's the only thing that matters. She pulled him to his feet and kissed him hard. Is that a yes? He asked against her lips. That's a yes. They married in spring, when the gardens at Windmere were thick with blossoms and the air smelled of new beginnings. The ceremony was small, just family and close friends. Crispin gave her away with tears in his eyes. Colonel Webb stood as Hadrian's witness, and Edmund Hale, the solicitor who had risked everything to save his young lord, wept openly in the front row. The wedding night was everything the first night had been and more, sweeter for being sanctioned, deeper for being permanent. They came together like two halves of a whole, and when Seren fell asleep in her husband's arms, she knew she would never be alone again. 1 year later, Seren stood at the window of the master bedroom at Windmere, watching snow fall gently over the gardens. The fire crackled behind her, warm against the winter chill. And in the cradle beside the bed, their daughter slept, small fists curled against her cheeks. You should be resting. Hadrian's arms slipped around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. The physician said you need to recover your strength. I'm not tired. You're always tired. You just refuse to admit it. She smiled, leaning into him. I was thinking about the market, the day we met. The day you accosted a bleeding stranger and kissed him senseless. The day I saved your life. Same thing. He pressed a kiss to her hair. Do you ever regret it? Everything that came after. She turned in his arms, reaching up to trace the faint scar above his left eyebrow. The wound she'd bandaged in a dusty dovecoat, a lifetime ago. Never, she said. Not for a single moment. Even when society whispered about us, let them whisper. Even when my father's enemies tried to destroy us, we destroyed them instead. Even when I tried to run away, she smiled, pulling him down for a kiss. Especially then, because you came back, you fought, you chose me. I'll always choose you. His forehead rested against hers. In every storm, in every impossible situation, in every moment when the world says I should choose duty over love, I'll always choose you. From the cradle, their daughter stirred, making soft sounds that might have been contentment or hunger or simply the small noises of new life learning to exist. Seren looked at the child, at the man, at the snow falling soft and silent outside. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night at the inn?" she asked quietly. "When I asked why you kissed me back, I said you were either very brave or very foolish. You did," she smiled, "and you were wrong. I wasn't either of those things. I was just a woman who looked at a stranger and saw something worth saving. And what do you see now?" She looked at him, at the eyes that had haunted her dreams, at the man who had been running his whole life until she gave him a reason to stop. "Everything," she said simply. "I see everything." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing Windmere in white, covering the scars of the past with the quiet peace of the present. And in that moment, surrounded by the warmth of fire and family and love, Seren Calloway Vole, Duchess of Windmere, knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. Some kisses, it turned out, really could save a life, and some loves, the real ones, the impossible ones, the ones that required courage and sacrifice and choosing each other every day, those were worth everything. Thank you for staying with Seren and Hadrian until the very end. Their story began with a desperate kiss that changed everything. But in truth, it began with a choice. The choice to see a stranger and help him anyway. The choice to fight for love when everyone said it was impossible. The choice to believe that some storms are worth weathering and some people are worth waiting for. If you're not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because there are more stories waiting. More impossible loves, more desperate choices, more moments that remind us why we believe in happily ever after. Thank you for being here. You're the reason these stories exist.